Now, in the wake of increased Russian spy activity, and as we look to the European parliamentary elections, which are now only 1 month away, we are joined by a special guest, Professor Danuta Hübner, to discuss the impact of the Russian and Chinese influence in Europe, but not only.
Danuta Hübner served as European Commissioner for Regional Policy from 2004 to 2009, but since then has served as a member of the European Parliament for several years while chairing and sitting on several wide-ranging committees. Professor Hübner played a key role in Poland's accession into the EU and held many key government positions over the years. Welcome to TVP World, and thank you very much for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you for the invitation.
So we are just wrapping up President Xi Jinping's journey in Europe, the first one in 5 years, and I'd just be keen to hear your comments as he just wraps up his journey.
Well, I think when you think of the Chinese, there's probably a very long-term strategy behind that. So I think they are just caring about the business activity here and the investment in Europe by China. And because when I look at the countries, it's of course Serbia and Hungary. Serbia is additional. There is probably the anniversary of the tragedy with the Chinese embassy years ago. But also I think between Serbia and Hungary, Chinese have built a big motorway, which is also an important. And probably there are more plans about it. But also there was France. And the good news, I would say, if I can look for good news in such events, was that President Macron invited also Madame Ursula von der Leyen there, so they could also talk about or show the unhappiness with a lot of things which we face in our relations with China, which is usually we don't have a level playing field in relations with China. We also don't find easy solutions to a lot of very distortive actions on the side of China, but we are still trying to keep the channels open for the conversation, which might be now, I think, it's very much also in line with the US is doing, because normally we thought that we have a very different approach, but now we also see Chinese officials visiting the United States and talking to the officials, the president, to Secretary Blinken. And so I think we are all trying to keep the relations, but we also are very clear on what type of relations China has now been maintaining for years during the war with Russia. And this is what we are trying to convince them, that they should just stop supporting Russia, for example, with the export of double-use products to Russia, which then Russia uses to produce weapons. So we see it as military support for Russia, which we believe China should stop.
Right. And if we look at the whole concept of de-risking in Europe, right, we've seen how Europe is very reliant on cheap goods from China, on the supply chains. That was very much highlighted during the pandemic. And we're also trying to align strategy with the Americans to some degree. But each European country has their own interests. They have their own economic interests with China. How for Europe as a whole, and as a European Union, to develop a strategy to really de-risk from China, to move supply chains closer to home, not be so reliant on these cheap Chinese goods, in light of the fact that we have elections, we're democracies.
But you know, on China, of course, we have the competences, which are the competences of the European Union on trade, and then we have also bilateral relations with China, is mostly about investment and investment of European companies also in China. So indeed, it's difficult to. We have been fighting with it for years to establish a common position that everybody would stick to. But whatever the Commission can do, I think Commission is very tough on all the aspects with a lot of infringements, also procedures that we have started. So we are trying to keep China under certain control, I think. But then, of course, we have the national interest, and that's de-risking was our approach always when the US was still with decoupling. We already just proposed the de-risking, and the Americans are using also the de-risking approach now, which we think is very, very important. And also we need China as a partner for example, for climate fight against the climate change. And so that's also important. But the most important thing for us in terms of de-risking is just we switched from the dependency on Russia when it comes to energy, but we continue to have dependency on China when it comes to the so-called critical raw materials, which are needed everywhere in the newest technologies. So this is where we are not yet de-risked, I would say, and we still continue to depend on China, and on this we are also cooperating with America. But the last thing I would like to mention is that we have established also with America, we have a very good platform for cooperation with the Trade and Technology Council. There's no China explicitly there, but everything we are doing there is just to get us closer and to empower us better in everything that would make our dependency on China weaker. And because we know that China is building its dominance globally very quickly, so we have to be cautious.
Well, we're in a situation where we're 1 month away from the parliamentary elections. Xi Jinping's last stop was Hungary. Hungary isn't in the good books when it comes to the European Union. How do you see Hungary's position changing, or perhaps not changing, after the elections?
Well, you know that Hungary is taking over from now from Belgium the presidency.
Yes.
So there were some discussions a year ago how to cope with this challenge, and it's also a difficult presidency in the sense that during this presidency we will have the whole political cycle, the new political cycle actually launched, and after the elections we normally should have parliament functional in mid-July, but then we will start building the commission, actually, in my view, the most important institution in Europe. And normally we could do it probably faster, but it seems clear that this year we will start the hearings with the commissioners after summer, so probably September, and then the commission might come towards the end of the year. So, and then we will have also the change in the European Council, where also the term of the president, Charles Michel, is coming to an end towards the end of the year. So this president, and then there will be probably the one most important thing that Hungary will have to do is the budget for next year, because this we always do in the second half of the year. But I don't know how many of things which Belgium has started, but it was impossible to finish everything. So there's probably like 100 regulations in the pipeline. So we will have to do it. Poland will have to pick up everything after the Hungary, and so I count very much on the Polish presidency that we will move fast and on many things, including Ukraine, including security, building the defense industrial capacity of Europe. So that will be the Polish presidency will be very, very important. And Ukraine is very important, and we know all the attitude of Hungary, so I don't think they will move anything forward.
Right, I was going to ask about exactly Hungary and Ukraine, in the guise of Ukraine. Exactly, are they expected to hold up the whole negotiation process to accession?
Well, we haven't started yet really the real negotiations. We are still with screening, and we are doing a lot of things, preparing Ukraine also for the negotiations. And the Commission has also launched now the review of all the policies in the context of the enlargement. So we will also have the discussion after summer about not only about the defense package, which is going to be very difficult because it's also about money. And as you know, money issue is from where the money should come is always a challenging issue. But also the Ukraine in terms of all the steps that are ahead of us. And let's hope that Hungary will not slow down what they can do, they will just do. But I'm sure that Poland will just go very fast with everything. So for Ukraine, which morally I think is already in the Union, we have to do everything to show to Putin what is our preferred international order in Europe, which is Ukraine in the European Union.
We're in the midst of uncovering a number of spy scandals. Obviously, this week has been pretty much focused very much on that. Obviously, the case of Judge Tomasz Schmidt and lots of other cases are emerging. And I think there's a growing awareness of the fact that these elections are the ones that are very much focused on the Russian disinformation campaign, hybrid warfare, the influence, etc., etc. How much do you think is at stake when it comes to these elections? How vulnerable do you think, especially this region, is when it comes to what is happening right now and the elections, which are only a month away?
You know, it's not a surprise. It's not a new thing. We have been sort of seeing and watching the involvement of the foreign actors and interference in our politics, and also now in the elections. I think we have sufficient laws that are protecting us sufficiently if we respect those legal frameworks that we have. But still, we need, I think, this is an issue where we need just a huge front on the European side in this fight against the Russian fuckers and trollers. So it's also the support of the non-governmental organizations. We have a lot of those. The challenge is to also support them financially, which I don't think all the governments understand it well. The European Commission is also spending millions now on these aspects of the foreign interference. But we have also easy praise, like Mr. Schmidt that you mentioned. It's also a victim of, I would say, of this activity of Russia, and we just have to go through this, and there's no other option. And Russia is behaving like an international gangster, and we will just hope that we will manage to sort of save our elections, so that we will be able to sort of prove what is fake, what is disinformation, and but it's a challenge. It's difficult, and we saw it in Brexit. We saw it also in other places. So it's a big issue. But that's how they need this sort of new kind of war field for the fight. It's part of the war, the cybersecurity, but it's part of the war, and it's difficult to get the Russia sort of abandon this path that they have chosen, which can be only finished with the victory of Ukraine, which depends also on us, and we depend also on the American allies and on the NATO. We have to be together on the democracy side.
Also, one of the paths that Russia has taken is the situation that we see unfolding in Georgia, these massive protests against the Foreign Agents Bill. And, it looks, actually, Georgia looks like in a very precarious situation. The opening up to negotiations for membership just last December, and now the European Parliament is threatening to suspend that once again, and if this bill is passed. So what can the European Union do at this moment to influence Georgian dream not to move forward with these?
You know, what European Union certainly can do is just opening up to those who want, who actually deserve, because people deserve better life and deserve living in democracy. So we have this list of 9 potential new members. One of them is Georgia, but Georgia has been through ups and downs over years, and I think it's up to the Georgians also to finally decide and to show, like in Poland, we showed with our democratic elections what is our option. We want to be back in Europe, and so I think a lot depends on Georgia, like it depends also on Serbia, and they have to decide.
Right,
and
So
the challenge is not to just leave it on to politicians, because politicians come and go, but people have to decide somehow.
What about potential sanctions on Ivanishvili? I heard that's also been touted because...
You know, the process for the sanction is not just that Mrs. Hübner wants something or doesn't want. It's just we need unanimity. We need. We usually also work with our American friends on those, with British, and so I think if somebody deserves the sanctions, then they will get it. But
so we need to look forward to these protests, the third reading of the bill, and potentially the parliamentary elections coming up in October.
So we have to be patient, but.
Just one final question. There are concerns of these rising populist tendencies in Europe. For instance, Romania, the ruling coalition of the Liberals and the Social Democrats are joining forces. For instance, obviously Hungary is being scrutinized constantly. Do you think that is an expression of the concerns people have in terms of what is happening across Europe? They're concerned and they feel that the European Union perhaps isn't addressing their needs, or this is a demonstration of some other problems? What do you think this is a demonstration of?
Well, it's not a consolation, but it's not just a European Union phenomenon, the populism. I mean, American populism is slightly different. It's more like a personality cult. In Europe, it's more about programs, and it's more complicated probably. But normally in Europe, any populism is usually anti-European. So they are very divided, the populists, but some of them were used to be against Euro, wanting to take France away from Euro, then changing from Euro, then changing their mind. So they are very divided. And certainly what you are saying, you are right. I mean, we the Democrats, we fail from time to time. We don't care about things that are important for the people. And populism actually is exactly about saying to the people that, yeah, you are right with your policy and we will do it for you, and then also not doing it. So it's for us a big challenge, but I hope that European populism will be, well, it will be a fight, I think. Also, next, there will be a fight for Europe. After this election, there will be a fight for Europe. One of those challenges will be also to address the populism, European populism, and see that we have a centrist majority in European Parliament, then we have a good democratic commission, and then we also, in the next elections, we will have what we had in Poland, not what we had in Slovakia, and we have to look at Czech Republic also. You mentioned Romania, but we are afraid. Yeah, there's a lot of potential homegrown risks to politics in Europe.
Indeed. Okay, it's been a pleasure having you with us, Danuta Hübner, a European Commissioner for Regional Policy from 2004 to 2009.
Long ago.
Long ago, but you played a massive role for Poland and member of the European Parliament. Thank you so much for joining us at TVP World.